Sister Linda was taking on another New York billionaire by the name of Michael Bloomberg. A little known fact about New York City, 1 in 8 school children in New York City belong to a Muslim household. However, our holidays were not recognized by the New York City School Board. Mr. Bloomberg did not care to change the status quo. So Sister Linda built a broad coalition of support, and in the next mayoral election, she had all 8 candidates agree that our holidays will be recognized and observed. The new mayor, Bill de Blasio, as you can see in that picture, was held to that promise. No longer do our children have to choose between attending school or celebrating our holidays. Sister Linda does not back away from a fight. Maybe because she's from Brooklyn, New York, or that Palestinian blood in her veins. She has defeated 1 billionaire, and I have full faith that she can hold another one accountable. Sister Linda has participated as a volunteer with ICNA Relief in our hometown of Brooklyn, New York, distributing school bags to children in dire need. After the Baltimore riots, once again, Sister Linda joined ICNA Relief to pass out blessing bags, hygiene kits, and perishable food items. When I think of dawah in action, faith in action, I think of Linda Sarsour, a proud hijabi sister rocking a bright highlighter yellow t-shirt showing what Muslims for Humanity looks like. The countless hours Sister Linda has worked is a shining light for all of us to follow. An ordinary citizen utilizing her talent to change the image of Islam in America. We proudly stand with Linda Sarsour because she stands with those who are oppressed and marginalized. Please help me welcome Sister Linda Sarsour to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, South Florida. So I am very honored and privileged to be here with you this evening. ICNA Relief is one of my favorite organizations, and I take every opportunity that I can to come and support their work. I just recently did a banquet, ICNA Relief banquet in California, so I want you to know that your Muslim sisters and brothers at ICNA Relief are doing amazing work all over this country, not only on behalf of ICNA Relief, but on behalf of all of us as Muslim Americans. Sisters and brothers, I will also say to you that while I'm honored and humbled, I also stand up here with a heavy heart. I stand on this stage today overwhelmed, sad, horrified about the things that are happening around us in these United States of America. We cannot deny, my dear sisters and brothers, that we live in rougher times than we have ever lived in modern history as Muslim Americans. That we are experiencing now our second 9/11 moment. And as a community, we continue to scramble and to organize ourselves. And I believe wholeheartedly that we may not have seen the worst of it yet. Many people will say, Sister Linda, you are an alarmist. And I will tell you that everything that we are horrified by or believe that could happen to us is already beginning to happen to us. I don't know if anybody here has ever been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. But there's a sign in the Holocaust Museum, and it says the early warning signs of fascism, powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government intertwined, corporate power protected, labor power suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, fraudulent elections. Early warnings of signs of fascism, that means, sisters and brothers, that fascism is here, fascism is in the White House, fascism is the rule of these United States of America. During the election, then candidate Donald Trump said, I will engage in a complete shutdown and ban of Muslims. And immediately after he took office, he began an executive order that banned 7 Muslim majority countries from coming to these United States of America. Who were these people who were banned from coming here? Refugees, people who have seen torture and massacres and violence and things that we have never experienced in our lives. 7 majority Muslim countries where we have never had a refugee from Yemen or from Syria or from Sudan that has ever committed a terrorist act on this US soil. While I stand here before you on this stage in South Florida, Immigration and Custom Enforcement are engaging in raids in cities across America, including in Los Angeles and in Arizona and Texas and in my beloved New York City, rounding up and detaining your undocumented sisters and brothers. We have known white supremacists and Islamophobes in the White House, people who have questioned whether Islam in fact is an actual religion. Muslim conspiracy theorists who believe that there's some plan that we all have to infiltrate the US government and to have Islamic law rule over this land. These are people who are now the most powerful people in this country, who are finding more ways to demonize us, to vilify us, and to criminalize us as Muslims. The very fact that we are Muslim has now been deemed criminal by this administration that is sitting in the White House right now. As Muslims, we are told that we must trust in Allah, but tie our camel. And my dear Muslim sisters and brothers, you better get the ropes out, because the time to tie our camels is right now. What do we do? And people always say, Sister Linda, what do we do? What are we supposed to do right now as Muslims? And I will tell you, my dear sisters and brothers, is the first thing that we do is that we must, especially in front of our young people, we must stay unapologetically Muslim in these United States of America. That we not allow anybody to take away from us what is ours, and that is our beloved religion and faith that we follow proudly every single day. But it's not just about being unapologetically Muslim, it's about understanding a legacy that you carry as Muslim Americans in this room. Sisters and brothers, you didn't just wake up one morning in this country and it was just fine for you to be Muslim. There was somebody, there were people that came here before you, heroes that laid this path for you to be Muslim in America. And I remind my dear Muslim sisters and brothers anytime that I could, that when people tell us to go back to our country, I tell people, those very people that tell me to go back to my country, that as a Muslim, this is my country, and my lineage goes back farther than those that tell me that I need to go back to my country, that Islam has been here on these shores of these United States of America before this country was even called the United States of America. I want to tell you about your ancestors, Muslim enslaved people that came here. They were forced to come here, stripped of their language, of their culture, shackled on boats as slaves and brought to these shores. And I think to myself, my dear sisters and brothers, as we are anxious, as we are uncertain, as we are afraid of what's to come, that I want you to channel your Muslim ancestors and ask yourself, how did Muslim slaves, people who were shackled, how did they figure out how to stay Muslim and stay faithful? How did they figure out how to pray and stay connected to their deen, even under the watch of a slave master, even experiencing torture? So if your Muslim ancestors figured out how to be Muslim and stay Muslim, even under the watch of a slave master, then we have no choice as Muslim Americans in 2017, but to be unapologetically Muslim and to honor the sacrifices of the Muslims before us who have seen and saw and experienced more trauma than we will ever experience as Muslims in these United States of America. So not only do you have no choice but to be unapologetically Muslim, you have every right in these United States of America to be unapologetically Muslim. Sisters and brothers, there are people in this country, our fellow Americans, some of whom are in the White House, who wake up every single morning and their full-time jobs are to demonize us, to create propaganda, to try to tell a story that is not who we are. Sisters and brothers, I'm tired of other people telling everyone else who the Muslims are and what we stand for and who we are and what we believe. It is time that we as Muslims tell people and show people who Muslims are and what we believe in and what we stand for. There's a campaign out there that the most powerful people are prepared to take down our very Muslim institutions. Our uncles and aunties 40 and 50 years ago and 60 years ago who started organizations like ICNA and ICNA and organizations like CARE and MASS. There is an organized effort to break down the very infrastructure of the Muslim community. And I say in this room, and I say proudly on this stage, not on Linda Sarsour's watch, and I hope not on your watch, sisters and brothers. We have a responsibility to defend the very people who have sacrificed their families, their lives, their livelihoods, and have chosen to serve on behalf of our community. These organizations like ICNA Relief and ICNA and MASS and CARE, these people didn't have to do this work. They could have done small businesses, they could have all been doctors and pharmacists, they could have went to work in corporate America. Many of them are trilingual, many of them have multiple degrees, but they chose to sacrifice all of that to build the Muslim infrastructure of our community. So I say to you today that ICNA Relief is a pride and joy of our community. Because not only do they do da'wah by educating people about what Islam is and what we believe, more importantly than that, they show people what Islam is, that Islam is a religion of compassion, that Islam is a religion that believes in standing with the poor, in serving the poor and the most downtrodden of those around us. And ICNA Relief believes that when we say justice, that justice is not us, that justice has never been just about Muslims, that justice in Islam has always been about justice for everyone and all of Allah's creations. It reminded me of a story and the power of service. If people remember, in the year 2012, New York City was hit by Hurricane Sandy. And we as Muslims, the next day we went out to Midland Beach, Staten Island, to serve our fellow Americans who were hit hard by Hurricane Sandy. When we got to the neighborhood of Midland Beach, we watched our sisters and brothers taking water out of their basements, their furniture is out on the streets, their children's toys, their clothing, everything that they had worked for had been destroyed. Why do I tell you the story about Hurricane Sandy in Midland Beach, Staten Island? Because just 2 years before Hurricane Sandy in 2010, we had the Ground Zero mosque controversy, if you remember, where New Yorkers protested against the building of a mosque around the Ground Zero, around the World Trade Center. And at the same time, during the same protest, the Muslim American Society, MASS, your sister organization, wanted to build a masjid in Staten Island, and they wanted to buy an old Catholic church. And when the local residents in Midland Beach, Staten Island, the non-Muslims, found out, they organized protests against this masjid, to the point where they even threatened the life of the Catholic priest who was going to sell the church to the Muslim American Society. There were protests, People came from all over the city. And eventually, Mass was not able to buy that property. They told the Catholic priest, they said, look, we want to buy a mosque, but we think your safety is more important than us buying your building. We will find a building somewhere else. So when we went to Midland Beach 2 years later, what did we do? We ordered hot pizza because nobody's gas was working, their utilities weren't working. So we bought about 100 pizzas and we went and knocked on people's doors. And we knocked on your door and we said, excuse me, would you like some hot pizza for dinner? And I remember knocking on one door in 2012 of a woman. She opened the door just a little bit and I said, hello ma'am, would you like some hot pizza for dinner? And she said to me, I'm sorry. I said, excuse me? She said, I'm so sorry. I said to her, I'm sorry, I don't understand. I said, would you like some hot pizza for dinner? She then opened the door and came outside to speak to me and my colleague, and she said, I didn't know. I only knew what they told me. And as I stood there, I was so confused by the conversation. I said, I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm not following what you are saying. She said, I feel so ashamed. I said, what do you feel so ashamed about? She said, I was one of the people that was organizing the protest here in Midland Beach against the mosque. And I said to her at that moment, I was so taken aback by her, and I said to her, it's okay. Times change, things happen. And I went back to why I was originally there. And I said to her, would you like a hot pizza for dinner? She took the pizza from me with tears in her eyes, and she said, I want you to know that I'm sorry, and that I hope that you forgive me, and I hope that you go back to your community and ask them to forgive me. And she walked back into her home, and I walked away. And I said to my colleague that in a moment of need, that a woman who had organized protest against our community, stopping us from buying a building to worship in, that all it took was a Muslim woman in hijab to show up at her doorstep and ask her if she wanted a hot dinner. Sisters and brothers, the power of service is not to be underestimated. The power of showing up for people in their time of need. We didn't say assalamu alaikum. We didn't give the lady a pamphlet about Islam. All we needed to be was be Muslim, be humble, and be there in someone's time of need. And in that one moment, in that 5 minutes that I stood in front of this woman's house, I was able to change her perspective and get her to a point where she was asking me, her Muslim neighbor, for forgiveness. When these young people came on the stage earlier and they read a poem to you about our beloved Prophet, if he came to visit us, what would he see? And I was so moved by that. And I sat to myself and I thought, what if our beloved Prophet Muhammad was here today? What if he came and visited us and visited our Muslim communities in the United States of America? Would he be proud of us? Would he say, MashaAllah, the Muslim Ummah in the United States is united? Would he say, MashaAllah, look at the Muslim community, how they stand up for one another, how they defend each other. Look at the Muslim community, MashaAllah, how they provide service to their sisters and brothers and other creations of Allah. What are our Muslim sisters and brothers doing? I ask you, my dear sisters and brothers, to reflect on that and to reflect where our beloved Prophet would be and where he would be standing right now. You know where he would be? He would be at the front line of resistance against this administration. Our beloved Prophet Muhammad would be with the downtrodden, with the poor. He would be uplifting women in our community who are victims of domestic violence. He would be ensuring that the refugees coming to our communities are loved and embraced and had everything that they needed. If our beloved Prophet was here, he would ensure that our organizations and our leadership was taken care of, that they were not sacrificing everything to provide service to our communities. I always tell people, I understand you have commitments, you have families, you have children, you have professions, you need to work. So not all of us can be active in the Muslim community. But what I tell people all the time is, we don't all have to be the same level of active, but the least we can do is support those in our communities who are on the front lines, support those people in our community who have chosen community service as their way of life. It doesn't take much for us, sisters and brothers, to support those in our community who provide this service, not just on their own behalf, but on behalf of all of us in this room and outside of this room. And I ask of you in this room, in the time that we live right now, that you not just think about today and think about tomorrow and think about the next 4 years. I sit and think about 100 years from now. And I want you to engage me in a thought about 100 years from now. As we sit in this room and think about Muslims 450 years ago who allowed you to sit in this room and be Muslim, I want you to think about Muslims 100 years from now. What kind of conversations are Muslims 100 years from now going to be having about you, about me, about Muslims who lived in 2016 and 2017 and 2018? And sometimes, my dear sisters and brothers, I have nightmares. I imagine Muslims sitting in a basement quietly, and they're talking to each other and they're saying, why are we so afraid to be Muslim? Why are our women not wearing hijab? Why are we so afraid to go to the masjid? Why are our beautiful masajid so empty? Why are we sitting here so quietly? Why are we afraid to tell people that we are Muslim? So I ask you, my dear sisters and brothers, in every decision that you make in this time, that you think about those conversations that Muslims are going to be having 100 years from now. I don't want Muslim 100 years from now asking why you were cowards, why you didn't stand up for your Muslim sisters and brothers 100 years from now so they can practice their religion freely in this country. I want Muslim 100 years from now to say, MashaAllah, those Muslims who lived in 2017, they stood up for our right to practice Muslim. It is because of those Muslims that we are so unapologetic about who we are. It is because of those Muslims that we have more masajid in these United States of America, that our children are more proud to be Muslim. Those are the conversations, my dear sisters and brothers, that I want Muslims to have about me and about you and about ICNA and about all of our national Muslim organizations. So I ask of you today that when you invest in an organization like ICNA Relief, it's not just about helping them pay for their budget for this year. This is a long-term investment in maintaining the Muslim infrastructure of our community so that generations of young Muslims, generations of YMs, and those young people that stood on the stage, that 100 years from now, more young people stand on the stage and they remember this day and say, MashaAllah, there was a sold-out house in 2017 in South Florida. And that Muslim community stepped up. Heirs of the Muslim community, that you understand that you are one of many marginalized communities in this country. And in order for people to put their bodies on the line for us, you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to risk for others who need us, for others who need justice? Because when we fight for justice for all people, guess what happens? We too benefit from that justice. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you very much, ICNA, for having me.